Okay, good evening, everybody. Today's Monday night Parsha. This week's Parsha Shoftim. So there is a very famous vart, which a lot of people mention a lot of times, but it's a very interesting vart, especially when it comes. Shoftim is always read in the month of Elul. The pasuk starts saying at the beginning of Shoftim, Shoftim v'shetrim titan l'cha. You should appoint judges. Shoftim means judges, and shetrim means the ones that enforce the rules of the judges. Basically, you're calling the policemen, so to speak. So the Torah says, Shoftim v'shetrim, you have to appoint judges and policemen, l'chol she'arecha, in all your gates. Simply means in every city you have to have a bezdin to make rulings and halachic rulings and all that. But the world says that there are gates. By a person, there's also gates. A person has a gate such as the mouth, the eyes, the ears. These are all gateways where things go in and out. The Torah teaches us in a more personal level, not only about the making a bezdin in every city, but the Torah is saying basically that in every one of your gates, meaning your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, every time you want to look at something, hear something, smell something, you need to make a judgment. What is the judgment? And is it allowed according to Torah to see it, to smell it, to hear it? You know, that's the gateway. And the Torah says, meaning in every one of the gates of the body, you have to make number one a judgment. Am I allowed to see it or am I not allowed to see it? Am I allowed to hear it or am I not allowed to hear it? It's interesting. All these gates, by the way, have doors on them. The eyes you can close, the ears you can close either with your earlobe or just with your fingers. It's always possible to close the gateways of the person. But the Torah says it's not only important enough to make a shafet, a judge, to make a judgment if you're allowed to see it or not. You have to enforce it. If Torah says I'm not allowed to see it, the Torah says, the Torah says you're not allowed to turn away after your eyes, after your heart. You have to make sure to enforce the judgment of what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed to hear, what you're allowed to say, and things like that. Not only that, people are always, in the last week's Parsha of the Torah speaks a lot about kashrus, what you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat. Basically, the Torah over there is talking about being careful what goes into your mouth. You know, what food you're allowed to eat, what food you're not allowed to eat. But in Mussar Svarim, it says, more important sometimes to be careful what goes into your mouth. You have to be more careful what comes out of your mouth. Just like it's very important to control kashrus, what you're allowed to eat, what's allowed to go into the mouth. The Torah says you have to be careful what comes out of your mouth. Just as important as kosher. Okay, later on, a few psukim later, the Torah says, Torah speaks about a person that's going to worship idols, and the Torah says you bring him to Bezdin, and then the Torah says like this: Al pi shnayim edim shloisha edim yumasames. The person dies in court based on the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. Lo yumas al pi edachad. He will never die based on the testimony of 1 witness. That's what the Torah says. To condemn somebody in court, whether he's going to get lashes, whether he's going to get capital punishment, it has to be done through the testimony of two witnesses. The same thing in financial concepts. In order to extract money from somebody, you need the testimony of two witnesses. Okay, so the Torah says, Al pi shnayim edim yakum davar. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit in the spiritual aspect of the witnesses. What is the testimony of witnesses for us in our day-to-day life? But to preface it with the following. The Rebbe brings down in many siches what the Rogatchover, Rabbi Yosef Shusterman, who was it was called Sarah Torah in Poland, and the Rebbe was very into his learning. He says like this: there's two types of witnesses. There are witnesses that are called Eidei Kiyum, witnesses that make it happen, and there are witnesses that are called Eidei Birur, meaning they verify that it happened. Okay? You have two different types of witnesses. You have a witness that makes it happen, and I'll give you examples in a second. And you have witnesses that verify that it happened. For instance, when I lend you $1,000, we write a document with the testimony of witnesses. If I agree I owe you the money, and you agree that I owe you the money, you don't need witnesses. Why do you need witnesses most of the time in financial issues? In case I deny it, you say I owe you $1,000, and I say no, I don't. So how do you verify if I do or not? So then you bring the testimony of two witnesses. The testimony of two witnesses verify that the loan took place, the money was not paid back, so therefore you owe the money. When somebody, God forbid, murdered somebody and witnesses come to testify on the murder, they're not making the murder happen. The murder happened. The witnesses are verifying, their testimony verifies that Reuven killed Shimon. That Shimon's dead, we know. The witnesses don't make Shimon dead. The witnesses verify that who killed Shimon, Reuven killed Shimon, and therefore he has to be punished. That is the majority of witnesses in Torah. Sometimes there's what's called Eidei Kiyum. Eidei Kiyum means not only do they verify that it happened, they make it happen. For instance, if you ever go to a chuppah, you know that there's two witnesses under the chuppah. You call up two witnesses to watch the kedushin. When the chosin gives the kala the ring and says, you are consecrated to me with this ring according to the laws of Moshe and Yisrael, it happens. Now, those witnesses don't verify that it happened. They make it happen. For instance, if a man and a woman go alone into a room, man and woman go into a room, and they come out and the woman is wearing a ring. And the man says, I gave her the ring and said, you are consecrated to me with this ring. And the woman says, yes, he gave it to me and he said, I'm consecrated to him. The law is, it's worthless. She is not a married woman. But by monetary things, if they both agree you owe them the money or I damaged you, whatever, what do you need witnesses for? Here, they're both saying it happened. Nevertheless, the halacha is emphatic. It's worthless. Ein chayshish in the kedushin. The Gemara's expression is, it's worthless. You don't even have to think, maybe there's a doubtful kedushin. What is the purpose of two witnesses then? By kedushin, by gittin, same thing, chas v'shalom, a get. The witnesses of those two things, primarily it's those two things, are not only verifying that it happened, they are part of the process. They make it happen. Just like when the man gives the woman the ring, and that's part of the process of kedushin. Witnesses are part of the process. It's part, they're not verifying that it happened. They are making it happen. These are the two different types of witnesses that exist in the Torah world, in the world of Torah. The Gemara asks a question. I'm going to go off for a second. The Gemara asks a question, and Rashi alludes to it also. If the Torah says, Al pi shnayim eidim, based on two witnesses, so why does the Torah say, or three witnesses? If two witnesses are good, why do you need three? And the Gemara learns out a lot of laws. First of all, it's very interesting din. It's all in this week's Parsha. The Torah says, Al pi shnayim eidim. It has to be through the verbal declaration of witnesses. According to halacha, if a man would write, two witnesses would write their testimony in writing and send it to court, it would be invalid. For instance, if two witnesses watch the murder, and instead of coming to Bezdin, they write on a piece of paper, we, Reuven and Shimon, witnessed the murder, and and they send it into Bezdin, it's worthless. Why? The Torah says, Al pi shnayim eidim. It has to be on the word of the mouth. Bezdin needs to hear it from the mouth. Halachically, they're not allowed to even hear it through an interpreter. That's why Bezdin, in the big Bezdin, had to know, some of them had to know all 70 languages. Why did they need to? Mordechai knew all 70 languages. Why? Because you can't hear testimony through an interpreter. By monetary laws, the rabbis were lenient and they said, yes, you could do it through writing. Therefore, you have written documents today. But in testimony of capital punishment or lashes or things like that, not dealing with monetary or biblically, it has to be, the Torah says, Al pi shnayim eidim. It has to be by the mouth of two witnesses. Now, why does the Torah say two or three? And there's a lot of reasons the Gemara says, but I'm going to tell you one practical din. The whole concept, by the way, of witnesses is illogical. The Torah laws of witnesses is completely illogical. And I'll give you examples. If two witnesses testify, and opposing them are 10 witnesses, opposing them, 2 and 10 are equal. 10 say guilty, 2 say not guilty. They cancel each other out. This is 10 and this is 2. The Torah says 2 and 3 is all the same. 2 witnesses and 20 witnesses and 100 witnesses is all the same. To quote the Gemara's expression, Terei Kimeya. Terei means in Aramaic, 2 is like 100. Why? Because the Torah says so. It's Exeris HaKosov. There's no logic between it. Not only that, and this will explain a custom why what you see by a chuppah, According to halacha, if you have 10 witnesses and one of the 10 is not kosher, for instance, in the 10 witnesses, 2 of them were brothers, Moshe and Aaron, and another 8 people testified that Reuven killed Shimon. The problem is Moshe and Aaron are brothers. Brothers are not allowed to testify. So you would think, okay, Moshe and Aaron, one of them is disqualified, finished, put him to the side, but we have 9 other witnesses. The din is no. The halacha is edus shabatla miksasa batla kula. If part of the group of witnesses are nullified for whatever reason it may be, all of them are no good. Now, that doesn't make sense. And I tell you, take even a step further. The fact that brothers cannot testify together, it also doesn't make sense. Can you imagine Moshe and Aaron? You can't get 2 better Jews than those 2. Moshe and Aaron witnessed the murder, and they come to Bezdin. Moshe and Aaron come to Bezdin, and they say, we saw a murder. We testify that we witnessed the murder. Bezdin says to them, go home and have a nice day. You can't testify, brothers. It's Moshe and Aaron. Torah says brothers cannot testify. Torah says 2 and 100 are equal. Torah said if one of the 100 is not good, and they're all coming as a group, they're all not kosher. Automatically all disqualified. It doesn't only mean brothers, it means any relatives that the Torah says are forbidden. It's a whole list of relatives which are forbidden to testify, kosher to testify, and so on. That's why, by the way, if you ever go to a chuppah, a wedding, the rabbi or the MC, whoever it is, calls out, we are dedicating 2 witnesses to testify on the wedding, right? You call it the Eidi Kedushin. We're calling up Mr. Reuven and Mr. Shimon to be the witnesses for the chuppah, to watch the ring giving. Sometimes they'll even add to the exclusion of all others. Why do they say that? It's very simple. A chosin is about to give the kala the ring. The parents are standing under the chuppah, not kosher witnesses. They're relatives. Brothers, sisters, people are standing under the chuppah. And they're not kosher witnesses because they're related. So if those people, the father or the brother or whoever, has in mind that they're witnessing this, so then they disqualify all the witnesses because part of the witnesses are relatives, they're not kosher. So what do you gain by designating the witnesses? By designating the witnesses, you say, basically, nobody else is allowed to be a witness except these 2. So therefore, they can become disqualified by everybody else because nobody else is a witness. And therefore, the Gemara discusses what should Moshe and Aaron do if they saw a murder. So one of them goes home and one goes to court to testify. But if they go together, they're worthless. Not only that, they'll disqualify all the other witnesses that come. Okay? So this is a general rule in witness. Why am I saying all this? I'm bringing out a very important point. The Zohar says there's 2 witnesses in the world. At the end of Chumash, in Parsha Hazinu, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hazinu Hashemayim v'adabeira, I want the heavens to hear as I speak, v'sishma ha'aretz imrefi, and the earth should hear my words. Rashi says, what does that mean? Why did he ask the heaven and earth to testify? Moshe Rabbeinu says the following, Rashi at the beginning of Hazinu says, I'm a human, I'm dying. The only ones that are permanent is heaven and earth. And we know the Torah says in this week's Parsha also that when person has to be capital punished, Yad ha'edim tiya b'rishayin l'amisei, the witnesses are the first ones to kill him. Not only do they testify, the Torah says clearly in the pasuk right after the Yad ha'edim tiya b'rishayin l'amisei, the Yad kolam b'achareina. The witnesses are the first one to kill. So what is Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu saying? I want witnesses for all time that when the Jews behave, God will give them what they want. The heavens will produce, the earth will produce. When they don't, the witnesses, the heaven and earth, are going to punish the Jews. Okay? So there's one classification of witnesses called heaven and earth. Hashem made them witnesses. The Jews, there's a pasuk in Tanakh, in Nach, Hashem says to the Jews, Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. Jews are God's witnesses. What does it mean? Jews are God's witnesses. What is the God's? What do you mean we are God's witnesses? Atem Eidai, the pasuk in Torah says, the Jews, you guys are my witnesses. So again, let's analyze this now from a Chassidic perspective. What is the purpose of witnesses? Witnesses is to reveal something not known publicly. A murder was done. Not everybody saw the murder. We don't know who did the murder. We don't know who ate the pig. We don't know who borrowed money and denies it. We don't know. What do witnesses do? Witnesses reveal the concealed aspect that nobody knows. That's the purpose of a witness. Something that's open. I don't need a witness to tell me the sun came up this morning. Everybody sees the sun came up this morning. I don't need witnesses to tell me something everybody knows. The purpose of witnesses is to make sure that something which was hidden becomes revealed. That's the purpose of a witness. Hashem says to the Jews, Atem Eidai. Just like heaven and earth are witnesses, if the Jews behave or not, Hashem says about the Jews, Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. What does it mean we're Hashem's witnesses? Godliness exists in the world, but it's hidden. Nobody sees godliness. What is the role and the function of a Jew? Hashem says, Atem Eidai, you are the guys that reveal the hidden godliness that exists in the world. So there's two sets of witnesses. There's heaven and earth that will reward or punish, but they verify if the Jews behaved or not. When the heaven produces rain and the earth produces grains, then you know the Jews behave. When they don't, they're revealing, they're verifying whether the Jews behave or not. Like it says in Shema, Im Shemaya Tishmu, if you listen to my mitzvahs, you're going to get rain, you're going to get everything great. You don't, then the heaven and earth are going to stop. So heaven and earth are Hashem's witnesses, but they are witnesses. It's called Edi Birur. They verify something happened. Jews are Atem Eidai. Jews are God's witnesses. They reveal godliness in the world. They don't verify. They make God revealed in the world. They do mitzvahs. They reveal godliness in the world. They reveal life and existence in the world. That's what they do. They reveal godliness in the world. They make it happen. Like the witnesses of Kedushin. They make the act of Kedushin happen. They're not verifying, they're making it happen. The Jews reveal and make godliness happen in the world. And that's the uniqueness of the Jews' witnesses over the Shemayim Ha'aretz. But then the pasuk says like this: Lo yumas al pi eid echad. A person cannot get capital punishment based on the testimony of one witness. That's what the Torah says. Al pi shnayim eidim shleish lo yumas simply means a guy cannot die based on the testimony of one witness. There's a beautiful thing the Rebbe says. You know, in Shema, the ayin is big. In Echad, the Dalet is big. In the Sefer Torah, you look at the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The ayin of Shema is big, and the Dalet of Echad is big. So Chazal tell us, why is the ayin and Dalet big? It means aid, witness. What do we say? What is Jews testifying? That Hashem Echad, that God is one. So a Jew is Eid Echad. A Jew is revealing Achdus, the Echad, the oneness, the unity of Hashem in the world. And therefore the Torah says, Lo yumas al pi Eid Echad. The world will not die spiritually based on the testimony of a Jew who says Echad. Because the Jew is revealing godliness in the world. They're bringing godliness into, they're making it happen. So when they do it, they bring life to the world. God forbid when Jews don't, they're bringing death, spiritual death into the world. So the Torah says in today's Parsha, Lo yumas al pi eid echad, the aid of Shema Hashem Echad, that they're not going to die. But there's another interesting thing. If a Jew comes and testifies that I owe money, a Jew says, Reuven says to Shimon, I owe you $1,000. And Shimon says, no, you don't. Never happens like that, but let's say a freakish case. Reuven says, I owe you $1,000, and Shimon says, no, you don't. Not only that, if two witnesses say you don't, so Reuven comes and says, I owe you $1,000, and two kosher witnesses say, no, you don't. You know what the halacha is? He has to pay the money. The expression of the Gemara is, Hodas Baldin, the admission of the litigant. Kameya Edim is like 100, it doesn't mean it's even better, meaning the testimony of a person in financial issues, in monetary issues, is even stronger than two witnesses. Very interesting. If a person says, I owe money, even if two witnesses say no, you have to pay him the money. What happens if a guy comes to Bezdin and says, I just ate pig, whip me, give me lashes? Or a guy comes, there's a murder, we see a dead body somewhere, we don't know who did it. Reuven comes to Bezdin and says, hey, I did it. In the secular court, it's great. They have an admission, the guy gets killed. In Torah law, the guy is not believed at all. If a guy comes to Bezdin and says, I killed somebody, Bezdin says, go home and have a nice day. A guy comes to Bezdin and says, Bezdin, I ate pig, I want to get lashes. Bezdin says, go home and have a nice day. You are not believed. You are not believed to testify on yourself. The question is, by financial things, by monetary issues, we just got through saying that the person is believed even against witnesses. So why can't a person be believed on himself to testify that he did something wrong? So it's very interesting. The commentaries explain, but the Rebbe elaborates on this in Sichas. I am the boss over my money, but I'm not the boss over my body. My body does not belong to me. It's not my body. I cannot testify negatively against myself. The expression of the Gemara in Shulchan Aruch, Ein Adam Meisim Atzmei Rasha. A person is not believed to make himself wicked. Why can't you testify? Because your body doesn't belong to you. Your money belongs to you. And therefore, if I say I owe you money, I have to pay the money, even though witnesses say no. But my body doesn't belong to me at all. And therefore, nothing doesn't work anything. So these are in these few psukim at the time. You could talk hours and hours on these psukim based on Gemaras and halacha and everything. But we're going to move on to something else. Bottom line is, the Jews testify for Hashem. We are Hashem's witnesses, meaning we are not witnesses like heaven and earth that verify whether the Jews behave or not. We are not witnesses to verify if we owe money or not. The Jews' uniqueness is, as Atem Edai means, we make things happen. We reveal godliness in the world. We're not testifying that there's a God in the world. We reveal God in the world. We make it happen. Okay, next. Later on in the Parsha, the Torah says like this. When you come to the land and you're going to say, I want a king. You want a king? So the Torah says, saying, Tosim Alecha Melech. You have to make a king. The Torah says you have to appoint a king. And the Torah gives a whole bunch of definitions. He cannot have too many horses. He cannot have many wives. He cannot have too much money. He cannot lead the Jews astray. But there is a mitzvah in the Torah. In fact, the Rambam says that when the Jews came into Eretz Yisrael, they were commanded to conquer the land. They were commanded to destroy Amalek. Appoint a king, destroy Amalek, and make a base of English. Okay, there was a mitzvah to appoint a king. In the days of Shmuel HaNavi, the Jews came to Shmuel HaNavi, and they said, we want a king. We want a king. Seemingly, it's not a bad complaint. The Torah says there's a mitzvah appointing a king. Shmuel started screaming at them. Shmuel said, why do you want a king? God is your king. God is your king. What do you need a king for? And he admonished them. You want to be like all the other nations of the world that have a king? God is your king. What do you need a king for? So all the commentaries ask, 1 minute, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to make a king. What did the Jews do wrong? Same, Tosim Alecha Melech, you have to put a king, you have to have a king. The answer is Shmuel himself answers the question. Shmuel said, you guys came to me and you said, Nia kechol hagoyim. We want a king like all the other nations have. That's what bothered Shmuel HaNavi. You want to be like all other nations? You don't need a king, you have God. You're asking for a king because Hashem said there's a mitzvah to appoint a king, to elevate the Jews, to refine the Jews, to make them greater. That's a different story. That's a mitzvah in the Torah. You guys want a king because you want to be like everybody else, like the Joneses and the Canaanites and the Amaleks, and you want to be like everybody else. Shmuel HaNavi screams at the Jews, what is that? You want to be like the Goyim? You want to have a king like a Goyish king that doesn't go to battle, sits at home and sends everybody else to battle? That's what bothered Shmuel. But the interesting point is the letters Melech, king, I spelled Mem Lamed Chof. Mem Lamed Chof. Okay? That stands for, says in Sfarim, Mem stands for Moach, which is the brain. Lamed stands for Lev, which is the heart. And Chof stands for Kaved, which literally means the liver or the lower parts of the body. The Torah says like this: what is a melech? When first comes the mind that controls the heart, that controls the lower parts of the body. That's a true king. And that's the king within every Jew. What is a melech within every mitzvah in the Torah applies personally. What's the mitzvah of a king? First mayach, first the mind, like in Tanya, mind controls the heart. First the mind, then you have the heart, the feelings, and then you have the lower extremities of the body, the lower parts of the body. What happens though if somebody allows the heart to control the mind, which is the opposite of a Beinani, which is the level of a Rosh, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya? Then you have, if you have Lev, Mayach, and Kaved, you have the word Lemach. Lemach in Hebrew means like a Nebach, a Nebach. You know, he's not a person. A person is Mayach, Lev, Kaved. First the mind, then the heart, then the lower parts of the body. Because the mind has to control the temptations of the heart. You have temptations of the heart controlling the mind, that's no good. Okay, one of the mitzvahs in these in this parsha later on is as follows. It's called the Ari Miklat, cities of refuge. What is what? What?
What's the difference between having a Nasi Ador, who's the Rebbe who tells us to go right or go left, or having a king telling us to go right or left? Why do we need two? Why can't we just have the Nasi Ador without the king?
In the time of the kings, they did not have a Nasi, they only had the king. When there's no king, we have a Nasi. But the Gemara says Nasi and is the king.
Thank you.
Okay. So now the Torah says like this. There's something called the cities of refuge. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Torah says you should designate 6 Ari Miklat, 6 cities of refuge. In case somebody killed somebody accidentally, okay, accidental death, accidental murder, killing, whatever you want to call it, they have to run to the city of refuge. Then the Torah says, and like Rashi says, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be, now we conquered 7 nations of Canaan. When Mashiach comes, we're also going to conquer Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni, which is another 3 cities, another 3 nations. Then the Torah says you're going to have an additional 3 Ari Miklat. So the Torah says now there's 6. When Mashiach comes, we're going to have 9.
Why would you need them?
So the question is, when Mashiach comes, nobody's going to be doing anything bad. So why do you need more Ari Miklat? We shouldn't need any Ari Miklat. Mashiach comes, nobody's going to be killing anybody. But let's first discuss the Ari Miklat, okay, in nowadays. Before we answer the question, why do we need Ari Miklat when Mashiach comes if nobody's going to kill anybody? What is the concept of Ari Miklat today? You do something accidental. And like we learned many times in these classes, a guy, Nebuch, falls off a ladder, falls on his best friend. God forbid, Chas v'sholom kills him. He didn't mean it. It was a total, complete accident. The guy runs to the city of refuge. Why does he have to stay there? The Gemara says that sometimes golus is worse, exile is worse than death. Sometimes it's worse than death. Question is, a guy did an aved accidentally. Why does he need tshuva to such an extent that it's worse than death? He has to run to the city of refuge. He has to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies, and then he's let out free. Why should the guy suffer like that? What did he do? And the question is, nowadays also, how could somebody commit a sin accidentally? They don't want to sin. Accidentally, they committed a sin. So the answer is, we discussed this in the past. Good things, God does good things for good people and bad things for bad people. Which means in simple English as follows. If a person would not have any connection to murder whatsoever, not even in the most refined ways, he will not have any connection to embarrassing somebody publicly, which is like murder or whatever, all the things that the Gemara says like killing somebody spiritually. If a person would have no connection to those things whatsoever, God would have never allowed a murder to take place through you. If somebody is super fanatic in kosher, in kashrus, Hashem would never allow him to eat, God forbid, something, even accidentally not kosher. Like the Gemara says, there's a pasuk, Lo yu'ona letzaddik kol oven, God does not allow any sin to come to a tzaddik, even accidental sins. So the fact that the sin happened shows that the person has a connection to murder. Maybe a very refined way, but the person needs kapara for that. Which explains also, you commit an accidental sin, many times you have to bring a sin offering. You have to bring a korban chatas. What did the guy do? He ate something, he has to bring a sin offering. He desecrated Shabbos. He thought it was allowed and it wasn't. So like, what do you want from the guy? What did he do already? The answer is the fact that something you desecrated Shabbos accidentally through you means you're not good, you're not perfect in the laws of Shabbos. What does that mean for us today? The words of Torah, the 6 orders of Mishnayos, Sheish Ori Mikwat, they correspond with the 6 orders, the 6 Sedarim of Mishnah. You know, the Mishnah is divided into 6 orders, not Mesechtes, not tractates, but many tractates in one of the 6 orders. The 6 orders of Mishnah, Chazal tell us that the Torah is Ori Mikwat. What does that mean? Torah is Ori Mikwat. Torah is a city of refuge that when you do something accidentally, you run to the city of refuge. What is that? You go learn Torah. Torah protects a person from the avenger. Like this, the avenger is allowed to kill the guy that killed his relative accidentally. When he's in the city of refuge, he's not allowed to kill him. So Chassidus explains, who's the avenger that wants to kill us? A Jew committed a sin accidentally. He did spiritual murder. Who wants to kill us? The avenger. Who's the avenger? Mr. Yetzirah. He wants to kill us. So the Gemara says in Kedushin, in Pagabach Menuvel Zeh, if this despicable creature, that's what I mean, this despicable creature will meet you, schlep him into the yeshiva, schlep him into a shul. Why? Because Torah protects the person from the evil avenger of the Yetzirah. So the 6 orders of Mishnayos is a divrei Torah, the Ori Miklat, that protects a Jew today from the avenger of the Yetzer Hara when we commit Avedis. Or better yet, preventive medicine is when you learn Torah, you won't come to accidental sins. But even if, God forbid, somebody committed an accidental sin, they have to run to the city of refuge, means run to Torah. When Mashiach comes, by the way, this is one of the proofs that the Rambam in his book writes, how do we know that, where do we find a hint of Mashiach in the Torah? There's a lot of hints, but the Rambam said this is a fundamental hint, because the Torah says when I'm going to broaden your boundaries, you're going to have to make 3 more cities of refuge. And it never happened until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, we're going to conquer Kaini, Knizi, Kadmeni. Why? Why? It's a very beautiful concept. The 7 nations correspond with the 7 emotional evil traits. Just like there's love and fear and, chesed, gvura, teferes, there's love and fear of kedusha. There's love and fear of evil. Dr. Rebbe says in Tanya, Perek Vav, Zeh le'uma zeh asa lekim, one opposite the next God made. When the Jews conquered the 7 nations, what did they conquer of evil? The 7 emotional evil traits of the Yetzer Hara, of the Nefesh Habahamis. But what's interesting, the 3 nations of Kaini, Kiniti, and Kadmeni, which represent Kabbalah and Chassidus, explains the intellectual level of evil, that the Jews until Mashiach came were not able to conquer. We're not great enough to conquer intellectual evil. We're only able to conquer emotional, the 7 emotional countries, nations. Mashiach comes, we're going to conquer also the intellectual levels. But that can't be until Mashiach comes. So now the question is, when Mashiach comes, why do we need Ari Miklat? Nobody's going to be committing accidental sins because everybody's going to be perfect. So simply the Rebbe explains the reason is, by the way, all those people throughout the years that killed somebody accidentally are going to have to run to cities of refuge. The ones that killed people accidentally throughout ages, and then you're going to need more. But not because then people are going to kill somebody. It's basically for those that killed in the past, like it says in Shulchan Aruch, in Halach, the Gemara. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be lines around the Beis Hamikdash, probably going around the whole world, of people standing in line to bring sacrifices for all the accidental sins that we had. When a woman has a baby, after a certain amount of days, she has to bring a korban. When Mashiach comes, all the women that had babies throughout the generations are going to have to bring korbanos. People that convert to Yiddishkeit, part of the process of Gedus is a korban. So the Rambam writes, when the Beis Hamikdash will be built, they have to bring a korban. So the bottom line is, you need Ari Miklat. But perhaps in a deeper sense, Ari Miklat are not only there after the fact. The Torah of Ari Miklat, Divrei Torah Kodesh, that Torah protects the city of refuge. And when Mashiach comes, it's going to be Torah Chadashim Me'iti Teitzei. Mashiach is going to teach Torah that we never had before. That is the 9 cities of Ari Miklat, eventual. That will be the preventive medicine, so to speak, of any Jew possibly committing any sin, even accidentally. So yes, simply we're not going to need 3 extra cities, but we do, because all those people that killed somebody accidentally throughout history are going to have to run city refuge. It's part of their kapara. But eventually, It's not going to happen. Okay, at the end of the Parsha, there's a lot of mitzvahs in this week's Parsha, and each one is fantastic. The end of the Parsha, it talks about Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa literally means the chopped off head of a calf. What's the end of the Parsha of Shoftim? Torah says if you find a dead body outside the city and you don't know who killed it, okay? You find a dead body outside the city and there's no witnesses, we don't know who killed it. So the Torah says the following halacha. The elders of the city go out and they measure to the closest city. To the close, and there's a lot of concepts how to measure if there's a mountain and a valley. There's a lot of laws in the Gemara and Halacha how to measure it. But the bottom line is like this. You find a dead body, the elders of that city go measure to the closest city. Okay? And then what happens? The city that's the closest to the corpse, the elders of the city take a calf that was never worked with, never had a yoke in it. They bring it down to Nachal Eisen, to a place that was never planted and cultivated. Okay? And then the elders of that city come and they say, they say the following. Our hands did not shed this blood. The elders say, we did not kill this person. And our eyes didn't see it. So Rashi quotes from the Gemara. Did somebody think that these elders killed the guy? They're tzaddik and bezdin. So Rashi says what it is. Yeah, they let him go out of the city without an accompaniment. They let him go out of the city without food. And that's what happened. Okay, so listen to this. And then they chop off the head as if to say the person that died is not going to be able to have any offspring. And they take it to a land that was never cultivated. And you're saying, look what happened. This guy killed somebody. He killed future generations and it's terrible. But what do the elders think about it? The elders come along and say, we did not shed this blood. What does this mean spiritually for you and me today, or you and I today? Sometimes there are Jews that are spiritually dead. They don't know. They were never taught. They're spiritually dead. You find a Jew who is spiritually dead outside the city. And you don't know whose fault is it that he's not religious, that he's ignorant. The elders of the city go out and they say, we are not responsible, because really they are. Because whose fault is it that these people are not religious? The leaders of this community are to make sure that they were taken care of spiritually, not only physical food, physical accompaniment. We're talking about spiritual food, spiritual accompaniment. They have to come along, the elders, and they have to say, our hands did not kill this person. It's not our fault. Because it is their fault. And they have to proclaim, no, it's not our fault. What does this mean in a spiritual sense? It's very interesting. When Yosef revealed himself to the brothers, he sent a message home to Yaakov that he's alive. Yeah, the brothers went back to Yosef and said, go home, tell Abba I'm alive, come down to Egypt with everybody. I'll take care of you. So what happened? Yosef sent wagons together with the brothers. Brothers come home and they say to their father, Yosef Chai, father, Abba, Tate, whatever they like. They said, Yosef is alive, and he's the leader of the whole Egypt. Superpower. It says in the Chumash, Kaleihem min lahem. He didn't believe them. Then it says, he saw the wagons that Yosef sent. And then he became alive. So Rashi calls in the Medrash, what happened over here? When Yosef left his father 22 years old earlier to see how the boys are doing, and they sold him then, Yaakov was learning with Yosef the dinim of Egla Rufa. He was learning these dinim. Yosef, 22 years later, being the viceroy of Egypt, when he sent Agolis, he didn't send only physical, he sent physical wagons. But Yosef sent a message, Father, I still remember what you taught me 22 years ago, which means Egypt didn't affect me. I'm still Jewish. Now we understand the discussion. Yosef, the brothers said to Yaakov, Yosef is alive and he's the ruler of Egypt. Yaakov said that can't be. Yosef to be a tzaddik and to be involved in Egypt is a contradiction of terms. So the brothers showed Yaakov the wagons. He showed him that even then Yosef remember what happened 22 years ago. Then Yaakov believed him, and then Yaakov became alive because he saw that Yosef was still a religious Jew, a tzaddik. Why was it that aspect of Egla Rufa that they were learning? Could have been something else. So the Rebbe explained in the Sikha that Yosef was telling him, just like Egla Rufa comes along and says, we did not spill this blood. Yosef took care of every single Jew in Egypt. Yosef took care of all the Egyptians for their 7 mitzvahs. Yosef is saying to Yaakov Avinu, I'm not saying I took care of everybody. It's not that we sent them without accompaniment, without food, without anything. Yosef is telling, that's why that was that mitzvah pick, because that's the concept of Egla Rufa, that you can't allow a Jew to become dead. A Jew is traveling on a path, an unknown path, a dangerous path of life. He needs accompaniment of Torah. He needs spiritual food. And that's the mitzvah of Egla Rufa today. You can't afford to see a Jew spiritually dead and come along and say, it's not my fault. It is your fault. Why didn't you teach him? Why didn't we teach him? Why didn't we accompany him in his path of life? This is the lesson of the Parsha, amongst the many millions. Anyway, Wednesday night of Mitzvah Shem is Aloch and Tanya at 8:30. Until then, everybody have a good month of Elul. Remember, do tshuva, avoid the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur rush, do tshuva now.
Amen.
We're very busy. Have a great week. We'll see you Mitzvah Shem Wednesday night. Take care.
Thank you, as always.